Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and thank you for joining. Welcome to the Crush the Quo webinar series, a platform that brings great minds and experts, business leaders and entrepreneurs, sellers, enablers, and industry masters together to share their ideas, their experiences, and strategies for us as individuals and for businesses who are looking for something new, something disruptive, and something helpful. So in today's webinar, we are going to be discussing the topic of translating complex technology into simple nuggets. Our speaker is Bob Lucas, Senior Revenue Enablement Manager at Juniper Networks. So about our webinar today, we are in a complex world and there is so much technology. So this is very much technology focused and trying to simplify complex technology for our stakeholders, our buyers, and for our sellers is no easy task. And, they say things like, we can't use the product team, what the product teams are building, because it's too complicated, it's too technology-like. And so this is what we hear a lot from sellers. And so in a world of acronyms, technical acronyms and complexity, the right analogies and components of storytelling can be your next Rosetta Stone. About Bob. Bob is a seasoned sales enablement manager, currently with Juniper Networks. Has a unique skill set honed over nearly 10 years in sales enablement and 17 years prior as a technical trainer and systems engineer. So if anyone knows anything about how technology language can get difficult to understand, it certainly is Bob, right? I'm sure in your training, Bob, it's always been very technical. And Bob has a proven track record and excels in crafting and delivering successful enablement programs for both sales and technical audiences, as well as channels. And I've worked with Bob over a number of years on a number of enablement programs and initiatives. As with all of our sessions, they are being recorded. And the recordings you will find on our Crush the Quo website on the recordings page.
All right, Catherine, thank you very much for that wonderful introduction. So, as Catherine mentioned, I've been in sales enablement for quite some time, both as a leader and as a practitioner. And as some of you out there know, I used to be a technical instructor many years ago and instructor manager, worked at Symantec for 14 and a half years through many, many acquisitions, had different roles there. And, this is where I am today at Juniper Networks. And you can see some of the certifications on there. But more importantly than the certifications themselves, I keep thinking back to my very early days at Symantec, which was then Veritas Software, about how I really needed to interpret, capture, and understand very technical material, which included acronyms like this. 15, 20 years ago, I would have had no idea what these acronyms mean. Now they're a part of everyday language if you do this type of thing on a daily basis. But one of the things I want to get across to everybody today, and I think this could stimulate some good discussion, since we're all in enablement and training here. Think about your audience, think about your sales teams, think about that person that just isn't familiar with this technology, doesn't really know what these acronyms mean, and is too afraid to ask about it for fear of looking dumb. What you're going to learn today is some technology that is very simplified and stuff you didn't think you knew that I'll be able to teach you in about 5 minutes or less. And methods that you can use for similar technologies, whatever they may be, whether they're software, firmware, hardware, networking, applications, whatever it is. And you can use these methodologies to just simplify complex technology into simple components using things like analogies, busting up acronyms, storyline telling. So all of these things we're going to be doing today. The target audience today, generally revenue enablement, which is an expanded form of sales enablement for those of you that aren't familiar. But this could help a lot of different folks in that field, leaders, practitioners, content development professionals, delivery professionals, management professionals, any IT professional seeking to simplify communication of highly technical content that isn't general knowledge. I would even add systems engineers, technical consultants, professional services folks, trying to explain things to prospects or customers who probably get inundated with technology and acronyms every single day and they just can't figure it out. How do you keep it simple? Upon completion, hopefully, you'll be able to understand how to simplify any complex technology at any level using what I call the why before the what. And I'll explain what that is. Being an acronym buster with a cape on your back. So not being satisfied with acronyms and just thinking about what it might be, but spelling things out and understanding a little bit more about why that term or that acronym is what it is and what it does for that customer. Common analogies you can use. Everybody loves a good story, right? Especially this time of year where we're going into the holidays. And I have a couple examples that I think will resonate that you might be able to use yourself on any technology you have. And then I'll talk about something called component storytelling. And I'm not going to go into a lot of depth because that in and of itself is probably another one of these webinars. But I'll give you the part one on how you can set up a story using those analogies and using the why before the what. And you can apply these concepts anytime for any sales team, not just sales teams, but you can explain things to your parents or your sister or your brother or your cousin or your aunt or uncle, anytime with any technology. And this will also hopefully help you deliver an enablement content with better assurance of sales outcomes, because the more salespeople understand, the more familiar and confident they become with it, and the more passionate they can deliver their message with, right? And salespeople aren't going to or learn something that they're not comfortable with. So there's different ways of dealing with that. Okay, so I always like to understand my audience, which is probably the cardinal rule of any presentation. Who's out there today in the audience? I know a couple of you, but if you could just do a quick poll and answer the poll. Catherine's going to set it up for us. Are you an enabler? Are you in sales? Are you a systems engineer or a technical field? Are you a product manager, product marketing, or any other types of role? So 2 questions. First question is, what is your role? Just to get to know what you do. And what are you responsible for? Do you develop and present your own material to sales teams? Do you translate complex technology into simple nuggets and present that to sales teams, usually created by product teams? Or is this a mixture of both? I don't know if we can see the results maybe.
Yes, let me bring the results up.
Amusing. Look at that. Developing your own, a mixture of, interesting. Translating and presenting content created by product teams is the lion's share on number 2 there. That's good to see. And most of you are responsible for enablement, and we have a couple of others in the room. With the others, what are you? Send something in the chat so I can get an idea of what your role is. You don't have to tell me. I don't need a resume. You can do that on LinkedIn. There's a LinkedIn slide at the end of this session if you want to connect with me on LinkedIn. I'd love to connect with all of you. But for now, just let me know in the chat, what do you do at your current company? Or if you're not working, what do you do as your own business? All right, so it looks like we're all in the same boat. Almost all of us have to translate this material into simple nuggets. Here's a video. I want you to explain what this video is about just by listening and watching the video. And what I'm going to ask you to do, if you can see the reactions icon in Zoom in the little console, go ahead and raise your hand when you get confused about what you're going to see and hear. Here we go.
Here at Rockwell Automation's world headquarters, research has been proceeding to develop a line of automation products that establishes new standards for quality, technological leadership, and operating excellence. With customer success as our primary focus, work has been proceeding on the crudely conceived idea of an instrument that would not only provide inverse reactive current for use in unilateral phase detractors, but would also be capable of automatically synchronizing cardinal gram meters. Such an instrument, comprised of Dodge gears and bearings, Reliant electric motors, Allen Bradley controls, and all monitored by Rockwell software, is Rockwell Automation's Retro-Encabulator. Now basically, the only new principle involved is that instead of power...
Okay, we're not even into a minute into the video, and I see some hands up, and I know there's confusion out there. I can feel it in the air. That thing looks like some kind of a hot water heater. I have no idea what that is. And might have understood a few terms at the beginning, the gears and a few of those companies he has on the board. But once he starts to open up that cabinet there and talks about the Retro-Encabulator, wow. Okay, so interestingly enough, this is what your salespeople hear when they hear things like domain name system, dynamic host configuration protocol, Cloud Metro, right? I mean, there's these different terms that are so indigenous to companies and products and teams and technology. Whereas from the salesperson's perspective, this is what they hear when they're unfamiliar, and it's just a mishmash of different things that they just can't get their head around, and they're not going to take the time to try to figure it out. So this is one of my favorite quotes from this guy. And this is something I tried to do with all of the system engineers that I used to work with at 2 different companies in my past. Is if you can't explain it simply, you just don't understand it well enough. You don't understand it well, not the customer, you. The best systems engineers, the best presenters, the best enablers that I've ever worked with can explain anything at any level to anybody. So they can explain what a retroencabulator is to the janitor, to the middle manager, to the CTO, to the CEO. And they do it a different way, but they understand how to simplify information. So hopefully you'll be able to get some tips today from that. If you know this gentleman, Scott Santucci, he's a longtime friend and colleague, very great presence on LinkedIn. You've probably seen a lot of posts from Scott. This is one of my favorite. Sales is simple, but simple is hard. It's not easy. It's easy to post or present something complex that you already understand. You get in the zone, you're passionate, you love it, you talk all about it, and you tell everybody how beautiful your baby is. And unfortunately, after a minute or less, nobody's there with you, and you've kind of lost them in the first half minute. Simple is difficult. Simple requires things like viewing things from different people's perspective. It requires knowing your audience, trying different ways. Not everybody's going to catch it information passed on the first time. Most people are pictorial learners, right? So we draw a picture. We always say a picture tells 1,000 words. That doesn't mean they're going to understand every picture. And some pictures don't translate very well into different, in different cultures. Simple requires viewing things from different people's perspective. It requires listening and watching your audience as you go. That's why sometimes people have, there's a requirement to turn on webcams. I love when everybody turns in their webcam in my classes, because I can see the facial expressions. I can see the body language. I can see the deer in the headlights look when I'm going through something, and I'll stop in the middle of it and I'll try something different. Let me explain this another way. Does this make sense? Should I draw a little whiteboard for you? Should you draw a picture for me? So it's hard, and you have to try different things. So we said, know your audience, right? How you present one-on-one should be very, very different than how you present 1 to hundreds. If those of you who have presented at large conferences like the VMware or Macworld or something like that, usually you have more than 100 people in that audience. Imagine trying to use Zoom and then switching over to a whiteboard function, either within Zoom or maybe another application. And then you have 100, 150 people in the audience who may have their laptops on the desk as well. Half of them aren't even paying attention to you. And the other half that are, most of them are probably going to have troubles or challenges or some issue with switching over from one platform to another. Whereas if I were talking one-on-one to one of you right now, and I tried something in Zoom and it didn't really work, I'd say, hey, pop up a whiteboard, and I could sit there and wait a couple minutes. But you can't do that when you're presenting to hundreds and hundreds of people. Demographics are super important. Do you have a global audience? You don't want to present something that's so indigenous to wherever you live or wherever you work that the rest of the world's not going to understand it. So you have to consider more generic terms. Try not to use slang words. Try to connect and slow your pace of your speaking. If you have a mixed audience, sales and SEs or sales and technical people, you're going to have to default to the lowest common denominator, usually, right? Salespeople, again, they are only going to listen and pay attention to things they understand. So a good way to kick off a presentation in a mixed audience is to kick off something that you know everybody's going to understand. Maybe it's a win story from that particular customer, or maybe it's a movie clip that they all understand, or maybe it's something that everybody recognizes. And then from there, you could dig down into the details. Is it internal? Is it external? Is it a mixture of both? And sometimes we even think about things like pre-assessments. There's nothing wrong if you're doing, especially if it's a training course or something that they have to do, mandated by their management, there's nothing wrong with setting up a quick poll or pre-assessment to see what level everybody's at. You're not testing them. That information is helpful for you, the presenters, so that you know the baseline of where everybody is, that you can mention something like DNS, and you know everybody's going to know it if they scored high across the board on the pre-assessment. So once you know your audience, this is where you start to break down the technology into simple components, right? You don't have to simplify everything just yet. But again, like I said, you find a familiar theme, find a familiar analogy, or tell a quick story that you're pretty sure that everybody's going to recognize, so that they get on the same page, that snaps their attention into gear. And then you have their attention. You got eye contact, right? You got facial expressions, you got body language. And if you don't know, ask. Pictures tell 1,000 words. I think most of us have taught in virtual classrooms, physical classrooms. Most of us have taught on Zoom meetings, on Teams meetings for Microsoft, right? I actually taught in an IT closet one time. Why? Because had 10 people to start out. It was supposed to be a classroom. We got kicked out of that classroom, got moved to another room by some executive that had to have a meeting at that moment. We got moved out of that second room into literally an IT closet with rack-mounted systems and retro encabulators in the closet. And I didn't have anything. I didn't have a whiteboard, didn't have pens, I think I had paper and some pens in my laptop case, but I didn't have flip charts or anything. And so I had to actually pick stuff off of the shelves and use them as props so that I could get people to focus on, inanimate objects, concrete objects, to try to tell my story. And I won't say it was easy. It was pretty amusing. We got a good laugh out of it. I found these plastic dolls or something in the side of the room, and I pulled those out of the corner and I set them up on the shelf, and I said, this is your customer, this is your partner, this is somebody else. How would you pitch this to your partner? How would you describe, this technology? And it was fun. It actually was fun. But you don't need a classroom. So I guess my advice is practice your story under minimal conditions. You don't need to go find plastic dolls, but imagine you're not in a classroom. Rehearse it, practice it with a friend, practice it over virtual, practice it in your home office with, if you have multiple monitors, you can put stuff on the top of the monitors, you can put notes here and there, you can put pictures. You should see the other side of my home office right now. It's kind of littered with all these different things that I use to kind of focus. And imagine you're in the room with me right here. And if you master the basics, then it makes it easy to add, to embellish, automate, to enhance, and add the graphics later. This is really important. Sales teams live and die by the why before the what. Sales teams don't really do anything unless there's a really good reason to do something. And if you've been working with sales teams for some time, you probably realize what happens at the end of the quarter, every quarter, right? All of those emails, all of those messages you send about the training, and you got to do this, you got to do that, you got to take the assessment, kind of go off into the cybersphere, and you never get a response because they're focused on the most important thing, which is making their number, right? And closing those deals. So if you can think about it that way, anything like emails and messaging, end of quarter activities, is really the antithesis of training and enablement. So you end up doing it the first week of the new quarter, and that's when, hopefully they're all back paying attention to that kind of stuff. So how do we follow the why? I've had people in the past who were on my enablement team ask me, should I have really been a seller before I joined enablement? I just feel this kind of imposter syndrome. And every once in a while, I just wonder what I'm missing. And I've never sold. I've never been a salesperson, never been a systems engineer. And I thought about that. And I thought about that for quite a long time. I remember coming back to this one person who asked me that. And I told him, look, I don't think you need to have been a seller, but you do need to think like a seller. And to think like a seller, you have to spend time talking to those folks and asking, what is a day in the life? What is a week, a month, a quarter in the life? So to be able to give technology context and focus on the why before the what, one thing I learned early on, this is what I told them too, is to understand how businesses define the why. Whatever technology you're talking about, whatever it happens to do, whatever product teams are producing in terms of assets or battle cards or information presentations, none of those conversations are going to get through the seller to the customer unless they do one of the three things you see on the screen. That technology has to either reduce costs, reduce risk, or grow the business and increase revenue. Hopefully more than one. If it doesn't, it won't get into the boardroom. So now we can say every technology does one of those three things. It's all on how you spin it, right? The devil's in the details. But I've done exercises in enablement classrooms without a single piece of paper or pen or whiteboard or anything, where we run a delivery exercise. We run a conversational practice. And whatever that salesperson says to me, I'll say, so what? Let's give you an example. Our product does all of these things and it's market leading in the industry. It's better than this, it's better than that, and this is the groundbreaking technology. My response? So what? Well, because we do all these things, because we are disruptive in the market to the network and we're creating a massive bandwidth. So all these IoT devices joining the network, so what? And eventually, before that person slaps me upside the head, if I'm lucky enough to avoid that, I'll get to the point where they find out that they really have to explain to me that this product reduces the cost, my cost of doing something, some operational or CapEx expenditure, reduces the security risk, helps me mitigate that risk, helps me remove the risk of bad guys getting in or bad guys finding credentials that they shouldn't, or it helps me grow, maybe moving into the cloud, maybe a cloud transformation or something like that. So just a simple exercise like that, a conversational practice, don't even call it a role play, call it practice, will help you as well as your sales teams follow the why and boil it down to what really matters to that customer. And I would say use the why as your compass to simplification. And then we have acronyms. Oh my. How many times have we worked for a company where there's been so many acronyms, we're afraid to ask what some of these stand for, right? Because we just don't want to look stupid. It's ironic though, because if we don't ask, then we'll never learn and we'll never be motivated and we'll never have context, which turns out to be a dumb question, right? So it's almost like if you spell it out, you're actually helping people as long as you can give context to whatever that thing is. And social media is no better generator of acronyms than anything else in the world. I mean, we all probably know what LOL means, but there's a lot of other acronyms that, frankly, I've never seen until I had to talk to my daughter and son and ask them what they meant. Some companies, believe it or not, have actually taken this vow of acronym abstinence. Other companies have created indigenous company dictionaries of acronyms. This is what these acronyms mean for this particular company. My company has one. I've worked at other companies who have had them. Well, I guess my suggestion would be spell it out and give it context. If it's really that important to talk to sales teams about it, just spell it out and give it context, give them the why. Here's an interesting ad that will kind of bring that idea to life.
Good morning, everyone. Hello, good morning, and welcome to the first training session for our SAP implementation. I'd like to introduce you to our instructor for today's session, Eddie Rayburn.
All right, first of all, I know how to spell SAP, so you don't have to keep on reminding me how to spell SAP. All right, today's lesson is how to get sap out of a maple tree. What we're going to do is we go into the forest, and we find a nice maple tree. Drill a little hole on the side here. Make sure that it's a little bit on an angle.
What is this?
Sap tapper.
I asked for a
Tap it into
partner
the
for
tree.
SAP training, not SAP training.
But they're at the top of the search engine results.
And what we'll do,
The guy said he'd give us a sweet deal.
put our bucket on here.
Oh, he gave us a sweet deal, all right.
We get our bucket.
So if you've heard of SAP, maybe you know they're a company, but in this particular case, the whole audience had no idea, right? And neither did the instructor. So be the acronym buster, be that super person. Consider what your audience may already know for sure. Maybe you don't have to bust every acronym. Maybe if you say something like sales ops, that sales team knows sales ops because they probably work with them every day, right? But SOPS, I've seen companies email SOPS@somecompany.com and they'll help you. They're like, what's SOPS? What is that, a new food? Is that a new drink? What is that? Is that a sponge? VILT, there's a great one. We all kind of assume that everybody knows what instructor-led training is and virtual instructor-led training. And so we say ILT and VILT and RVILT. But do they really know? I've been burnt by that before myself, so I know. And if you're not sure, again, spell it out. Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol, domain name system, that RAN one, that has nothing to do with runners, nothing to do with fitness. It's radio access network. It's for cell phones, mobile providers. And why is that important? There's got to be a why. If there's no why, you shouldn't mention it and cover, find another way, right? It depends on the business, it depends on the technology, but you have to give it some context. And then if people still aren't sure, and you're getting the deer in the headlights look, use it in a common analogy or a storyline. This is where you can get creative. You can exercise the right side of your brain as well as the left. Try something that will work, that people will recognize. Maybe a very common story or picture or something that everybody knows. All right, quick test. Guess what this acronym stands for? We all know what it is. I think we all recognize it's a car, yes. But do you know what it stands for? British Made Wheels. You wish. Good guess, but that's wrong. Well, it's a German word. Don't ask me to pronounce it. But it roughly translates to Bavarian Engine Works Company. Now, I never knew this until about a month ago. I don't own a BMW, but now I know what it means. How about this one? Maybe this is a little more familiar. This is a little more global, right? By the way, OTAN is NATO spelled backwards, but you knew that. North Atlantic Treaty Organization. You all knew that. How about this one? Now, this is somewhat US-centric, but
we all know NASA.
Yeah, well, I'm going to say we all know NASA. I'll give you a hint. The third letter stands for space, outer space. This is a little tougher. We'll give them this one. National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Now, if you're talking to a group of scientists that worked on the Apollo 13 project, or maybe something more modern, contemporary, you better know what NASA stands for. Right? And you better be able to give some context. You don't have to be the person with all the information. You're not the smartest guy in the room. They are, right? But this is what I mean by context. So your audience may know a little bit more than you do, and that's okay. But you have to have credibility at some level. So sometimes you're going to have to figure out what that means and provide some context with it. And I mentioned social media earlier. There is no better way to limit your audience than with acronyms if you don't give that context. Now, I actually tested Catherine on this a while back, and I would say she got a B-. She got most of these things correct. Do you guys know what FWIW means? Because I didn't know that one until my daughter had to tell me that one. And this one I keep seeing on Slack all the time. FOMO and also FOMU. Those are very similar. Anybody know what those mean?
Those ones we probably know more, right?
Yeah. Fear of missing out. Yep. And fear of messing up. I know you're all going to Google to cheat on me. That's okay. Fear of missing out and fear of messing up. So that was a new one on me. And this one just usually kills everybody. ICYMI. But I see it all over the place on LinkedIn and Slack. In case you missed it, that's what it is.
What is ROFL?
Rolling on the floor laughing, which we're all going to be doing after today's session. Okay,
Right.
Let's do another quick poll. I want to hear what acronyms you love to hate, and maybe we can bust them up right now. Give a couple of examples you've seen commonly, like in different places, social media, in your company, other companies, your customers, your partners, your clients, that always pop up that you can't stand. And are any of these enablement specific, like VILT or ILT? That's my favorite one. Go ahead and chat some in the chat there.
RTFD means read the documentation.
Yeah, there's a meaner one.
polite
That's a
way,
nice
right?
version. That's the nice version. Very good.
Yeah,
RTFM,
this is-
read the manual.
Read the friendly
Exactly,
manual.
RTFM, right.
Yeah.
Read the
Uh,
friendly manual.
Popular with
Yes.
customer service.
Customer.
Yes,
That's where I learned
exactly.
it. That's where I learned it. A tech support job. Exactly. Any others?
Yep.
Least fave. I got one. ROI. Commonly known, not well understood. return on investment.
Sure.
And then the most fave, RTFM. Yeah. Oh boy. Yeah. ROI, I guess, okay. You can probably say the lion's share of salespeople understand ROI because it's part of the why, right? When they go to a customer, they're presenting, a proposal. The customer's going to want to see what's the return on investment. Then you have these others that are technology specific that just drive salespeople nuts. So things like that really need to be busted out. That's why we're here, right? So here's an example. I promised you I was going to give you something you could walk away with as an example. Transmission Control Protocol, Internet Protocol is what TCP/IP stands for. Why do you care? You probably don't. But if you're talking to network salespeople, systems engineers, they all know what TCP/IP is going to mean. They better, or they shouldn't be in that job. That's a hiring issue, not a transmission issue. Encapsulating a TICP network packet. The reason that encapsulation and de-encapsulation exists is to protect the data that's inside that packet as it goes out of your device onto the network and onto the big bad internet, and then eventually arrive at its destination. If it wasn't encapsulated, if it weren't encapsulated, attackers would be able to see it. You'd see it all in clear text. People would be able to steal your information. Your credit cards would be stolen, and all heck would break loose, right? Well, encapsulating and de-encapsulation happens on every single packet from one point on a device on the network to another point, wherever it is on that network, every day. So this happens under the hood, and this is what it does. It protects and routes data over the open internet. Now, if I were talking to salespeople and trying to teach something like this, there's no way I would show them that previous slide, no way. But I would have to explain the why. I would have to use a form of analogy that I think most folks would understand. It depends, on the demographics of my audience. And I also have to kind of tell a story about it. Well, appropriate to the time of year at the holidays, maybe some of you outside the US see this movie. We see it every year about this time. A lot of networks will show it. It's a movie called A Christmas Story. And this is a story about a little boy who's getting dressed up by his mom to go outside to school. He's at the home, he's going to school in the morning, and it's about 20 degrees Fahrenheit outside. So she has to protect him, right? And let's take a look at this quick video and you'll see how the story, and then I'm going to explain it piece by piece so you can understand.
Oh, preparing to go to school was like getting ready for extended deep sea diving.
Come on, Mom, we're gonna be late. All right, Ralph.
My kid brother looked like a tick about to pop.
What? What is it? What is it? Oh. What is it?
I can't put my arms down.
Put your arms down when you get to school.
Okay. So even if you've never seen that movie, if you have children or you know friends that have children, they've gone through this type of thing. I know my family did at one point. But here's the funny thing, is if we think of this as a story and as an analogy, it makes it really easy to understand TCP/IP encapsulation and de-encapsulation. The boy, Randy, is the IP packet data, and he's going out in the big bad internet, which is cold and dark, and he has to be protected. So his mom is the TCP/IP process that encapsulates him with all these different layers. He's wearing 3 hoods and 5 mittens and 2 boots and all these coats. Their house is an application layer 7. And Randy is on his way to school, which is another application, which is also at a higher layer on the internet. So he goes from one layer outside to the other layer, and his clothes are the layers of encapsulation. Now, when he gets to school, this is another app layer 7, and his data is encapsulated and protected as he travels. But what does he have to do when he gets to school? Is he going to sit in class all day with all that clothing on and all that stuff on? No, he's going to sweat to death if he does. So the teacher has to de-encapsulate the packet because the protection is not needed anymore. He's already in school safely. That's it, right? That gives salespeople an understanding of the why, you have to protect him, the what, from one point to the other, and the steps involved in getting that data, encapsulated, transported, and de-encapsulated on the other side. Here's another example that you can use. Dynamic Host Configuration Protocol, DHCP. What is it? Why does it exist? All DHCP does is it gives any device on any network an IP address. You can't talk on the network until you have an IP address. You can't talk to anything else. So you need an IP address that's available for you. DHCP allows for fast turnover of IP addresses because we can't have everybody pick whatever IP they feel like. If two devices on the network use the same IP address, there'll be a big conflict and they'll basically trash the network and nothing will be able to be done. So we have to control which IPs we give out to which devices so that there's harmony and unicorns all over the network and everything's working just fine. Static IP addresses can also be exploited by attackers. If they know what somebody's IP is, if you give me an IP and you broadcast it all over the internet and I'm an attacker, I can attack your system or device directly because I know your IP address. So we don't want that. So every once in a while, we want to change the IP address to make it more random and avoid that knowledge of having attackers attack you on that same IP. So how do you explain this? Here's a good analogy that I've always used. Most of us have traveled for business. A lot of us have traveled for pleasure. When do we need a car? Sometimes if we had to get from a meeting or get to somebody's house. And what do we do to get the car? Well, we have to contact a car rental center. It could be a lot of different car rental centers. Hopefully a rental center that's close to where you are, where the device is, where you are at the airport. Well, if you are the device, so you're the laptop, you're the mobile device, you can't get to that meeting until you have transportation and you need an IP address to connect to those people in that place. So you can think of the rental car center as your local DHCP server. And the DHCP server has a range of cars. It has economy level, it has mid-level, it has some very special cars that are reserved for VIPs. Maybe the Cadillac is going to be used for a very important person that's coming in. Maybe there's a concert and this is the artist that's coming in. But each car is an IP address and you are the device. So if you don't care which car you get, that rental car center is going to give you the next car in the range, whatever one's available. And you use that one, drive it off and give them your license and there you go. Well, now you have that car, not permanently, but for a period of time. And this is what we call a lease, just like leasing a car or leasing a house or leasing time on some site, right? You have that car usually for 1 week, which that could change based on the administrator's preferences, but you have that car 1 week. And when you're done with the car, what do? You either renew the lease and you get another week of usage, or you release the lease and give it back to the rental car center. If you release the lease and give it back to the car center, what does the car center do? They put it back into the pool for the next IP address, or sorry, the next device to pick up, next person. So each of these cars is temporary. And the more cars there are, the more IP addresses that can be given out, the more devices that can connect. The closer the rental car center is to the airport, the easier and faster it is for the device to pick up the IP, grab on the network, and get where it needs to go. I hope this makes sense to everybody. This is a very simple analogy, but this is something you can use for a lot of different technologies, not just DHCP. And you can explain these things in a simple manner using common pictures, recognizable ideas, analogies, stories that people already understand. And that makes it so much easier. So what's your favorite analogy that you use to simplify complex technology? Do you use it in a story? Do you use props like the plastic dolls in the IT closet? Do you like to build Legos? There's a lot of shows on TV where they build amazing cities and different things with Legos. I mean, I've done that before too. I've had some Lego set and I actually built a server, a rack-mounted server, and played with Legos, which was actually pretty fun. Give some examples of your favorite analogies and stories and what you like to do. They could be stories, they could be TV shows, they could be quotes, like that Einstein quote we saw before. Some of us just will build a slide and get people thinking. I love Steve Jobs quotes. Man, there's so many of those. If you Google Steve Jobs quotes, there's hundreds and hundreds of quotes. It was amazing that he was that he had so many in the time that he was alive. One of them was about you can't try to do things better or faster than your competitors. You have to do them differently. That's one that always kind of resonated with me. And maybe you're going into a story about a technology that is groundbreaking or technology disruptive, right? We're disrupting the market doing this. You have to do it differently. And maybe that's an inspirational way to start out something like that when you're presenting to salespeople. So anything like that, right?
Does it have to be technology? Can we give you another example?
Doesn't have to be technology. Nope.
Okay, I'm just typing one in.
You can think about trying to explain something to your mom or dad, and you're just trying to make it really easy for them to understand. And hey, remember when we went to the beach when I was a little kid, and you brought us to the beach, and we did this, and we made sandcastles, and I built this big castle with two things on the side. Well, that's what my server looks like. I have a rack here, and I have two pizza boxes here, and this, and you're using terms that they can immediately engage with. You don't have to use all technical terms to describe technology all the time. You can use simple things and things that they recognize, right? I use an acronym in my webinars to discuss evidence for the beginning of the universe surge.
In the beginning
Whoa.
was a great surge.
Wow. Second law of thermodynamics. Universes expand. You lost me at second law. I don't know the first law, so I guess I failed that. Universe is expanding. Radiation from the Big Bang. Great galaxy. Einstein's theory. Einstein's theory of general relativity. Interesting. Yeah, so there's so you have an acronym that nobody really understands, but then you spell it out and you give it context and you breathe life into it. I love it.
Yeah.
And
And I
and you make it a
explain each
story.
one of the letters in a bit more detail with pictures and videos and things.
Right, exactly. I love it.
I
Okay.
see we have one from Jacques, favorite acronyms.
Oh,
LSA, let's stop abbreviating.
let's stop abbreviating. Yeah. Oh, I think I've seen Let's Stop Abbreviating, the Society for the Destruction of Acronyms, SDA. Yeah. I mean, if you Google acronym buster or destroy acronyms or something, you'll find a lot of funny stuff. There's a lot of stuff out there. Yeah. Thank you for all those. That's okay. So I think we're all on the same page with acronyms. What about storylines? Storytelling, I think it's a very integral, important part of any salesperson's skill set. And a lot of companies actually have storyline or storyboard telling or storytelling that they'll do. They'll do training for storytelling as a soft skill, right? There's a lot of consultancies out there that do this as a third party. Company I work for right now has hired these kinds of companies in the past, and they're great. They come in and they're experts at how to build the story. What are the main elements? How do you start with a storyboard? How do you add embellishments and graphics and automation and animation and just build out that story? So there's a lot of different theories and a way to do this. But generally speaking, you need these required elements when you build a storyline. You have to have the what. You have to know what happens in the story. You have to be ready for the setting. When it happens, when in time, or it could be any time. Who it's affecting. Usually you have a hero character and you have a villain that's trying to stop the hero from doing whatever he or she wants to do. And then the villain or the villain gets vanquished at the end and the hero's saved and the hero saves the day, right? Point of view, first person, second person, third person, and then the conflict. And this is where it all comes together, is how that hero avoids the villain and defeats him or her and then eventually achieves the result. So you could actually take that DHCP analogy that I mentioned earlier with the rental cars, and you can build that into something like a story. You can say, I went to a rental car center and I needed to get to this meeting and I needed to get there as fast as I could, right? I needed a car, I needed a GPS in the car, didn't know where the meeting was. I was relying on the GPS, and I wasn't willing to drive 20 miles to the next rental car center. I needed a rental car center that was right there at the airport that I could just jump on. And so for devices that are running business critical applications, those devices can't wait seconds. They can only wait milliseconds or maybe even microseconds to make that connection to the business critical application at the edge of the network. We all work from home, especially during the pandemic. What if all of those companies said, sorry, if you're not coming into the office, you can't run SAP, you can't run PeopleSoft, you can't check your email, you can't check your paycheck. That wouldn't work too well, right? So all of those companies over the pandemic years needed to figure out how to bring all of those business critical applications and services closer to where the devices and users were, which were Main Street, USA, where you guys are probably watching this video from right now, at your home or at your some office way out in the boondocks. Well, you can tell a story around that, how that device was able to make a fast, reliable connection, get on the network, and get business critical app up running in microseconds. And then eventually it led to growing revenue, growing the business. It reduced risks of failures or disconnections or latencies, and it reduced costs because the company was able to scale that cloud-based application across the edges of their entire network to thousands and thousands of these users. There's a story there to tell, right? It's just all how you want to, how much time do you want to put into it? All right, well, we're reaching the end of the session here. We got a few minutes left for some Q&A. I would love to hear from anybody who wants to share some of this experiences, some of the analogies that you've used, acronyms you've busted. What you thought about today's session would be very helpful as well. But some of the takeaways you'll be able to walk away with are the why before the what, the acronym buster, common methods and analogies you can use to make things simple for sales teams or any team that really doesn't understand indigenous technology, and how to build this into a story. You'll be able to apply these concepts for all of these different folks anywhere with any technology. You'll see better assurance of sales outcomes because salespeople will be able to understand and get behind it and be passionate about their delivery to their customer. They'll be able to ask the right questions, get the right information, and move forward on those sales deals and close those deals faster. And I hope to be back here in 2024 to give you a part 2 and finish out that component storytelling story, because there's so much more to talk about there. But with that, I want to thank you for joining us, and let's open up the floor to everybody out there for Q&A. Talking about home security measures to mitigate house break-in as a storytelling analogy. Wow. Yes, great point. I've heard just in my past, with respect to that comment, Greg, that you just made, DNS, domain name services, which everybody has to use every day on the internet, that basically gets you to a website. DHCP gets you on the internet or the network, and then DNS gets you to a website. Without having DNS security, it's like locking all of your windows, including your back door, and leaving the front door wide open. That's something that I always used to use. And I have some, if you go onto Google and you Google DNS security Legos, I think that's, if you just say that in Google, you'll find a really cute animated video of somebody putting Legos together with a Star Wars theme. That's what it is. DNS Legos Star Wars. A colleague of mine that I used to work with, one of the best salespeople in his entire geo, took the time to actually film a DNS Lego construction project with little Star Wars characters. He had Darth Vader as the villain, he had Luke Skywalker as the hero, and he was telling the story and narrating it all the way through, and it was all about DNS security. So easy to understand.
One of the analogies for Infoblox specifically, close to what you're saying, is that helps me understand is you talked about all the windows closed, but leaving the back door open, right? However, the back door has to come open from time to time, and you're going to have traffic coming in and out of that back door. How do you make sure it's only the right traffic that comes in and out? Because the door has to open from time to time, right? That's right. And that's kind of the way I see the DNS and what Infoblox used to do. I don't know if they're still doing it like that, but I liken it to a moat around a castle, and the drawbridge has to open to let the people in and out or supplies in and out. You know, you can't keep the drawbridge closed completely because then nothing can get in, but you have to still make sure you protect the castle by only letting trusted, proven, you know, people in, aka data and actors.
Yeah. And it's expensive to post a guard at the gate and let that person 24/7, you know, do the
and it's error prone because it's very, you know, subjective, et cetera, et cetera. And I see we have a video in the chat.
And what if people swim across the moat? Then you got to put alligators in that moat so people can't swim.
Well, exactly. So even the wall itself needs to be protected.
See, we're having fun with this, right? But you can map all of these things to parts of that technology. And if you think about it and you think it through, you'll always find a correlation. That's what I get some people saying, oh my gosh, I can't map it to everything. I'm not seeing this in my head. I'm not seeing the vision. You just have to take time and think it from different angles, right? So maybe there's an attacker that finds a way around the doesn't have to walk across the drawbridge. They can take a boat across the moat or they can swim. But we have to have another, you know, attack prevention methodology. We have to have intrusion protection, intrusion prevention, things like that. So there's always a way if you think about it. Somebody just shared a video on, this is the Star Wars Lego theme right here. I'm gonna have to deal with an ad first, unfortunately. Okay, skip that, and here it is.
Your business is under attack from evil forces, but they're not using lightsabers to take down your network and steal your data. They're using DNS, which is why DNS security is so important. DNS is the #1 attack vector right now because it's the weakest.
Now, if you're a salesperson, you don't have any idea what DNS security is, but you know you have to sell it as part of the product. How much do you love this? Like you're looking at this, oh, I know Star Wars, oh, I know he's the bad guy and there's the good guy. And all those names and companies there, maybe they're the partners, we're integrated with all those companies.
This is exactly why DNS is a major vulnerability.
Yeah, so that's just the exact kind of thing I'm talking about. So you can get
That's
through
awesome.
all of these. It's really
Who makes these things up? All right, Bob, I think we're at time. Thank you everybody for staying with us and for joining us today. If you'd like to connect with Bob, his LinkedIn link is there on the screen. If there's any questions about our webinars, don't hesitate to reach out to us directly. Thank you all for joining. And with that, we will wish you good night, good morning, or good afternoon.